Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Wes Sumner, spokesperson for the Florida Institute of Technology and FIT Aviation. I'm joined by Winston Scott, Dean of the College of Aeronautics at the Florida Institute of Technology. Dean Scott is also a former astronaut and fighter pilot, and FIT Aviation is under his responsibility within the College of Aeronautics. I have a brief statement, and then we will have an opportunity for you to pose questions to myself or Dean Scott. Dean Scott being able to handle some of your technical questions related to this incident. Additionally, we'll have a handout for you at the end of these remarks with the names of those lost in this tragic plane crash. And we will also have photographs available that we can email to you and to your stations regarding these four individuals. Florida Institute of Technology is mourning the loss of 4 people killed in a routine training flight that crashed on takeoff from Palm Beach International Airport at approximately 6 p.m. Thursday. The Piper Seminole aircraft was en route back to Melbourne from the Bahamas as part of a training exercise. 4 individuals were aboard the aircraft, 2 currently enrolled students, the flight instructor, and 1 additional passenger. Those who were killed in the crash: Christopher Joy Henniger, Florida Tech flight student from Memphis, Tennessee, age 22. He was due to graduate from Florida Tech College of Aeronautics in December. Jenny Teresa Frembling, FIT Aviation employee and instructor on the aircraft. From Melbourne, Florida, age 26, also a Florida Tech alumna, class of 2006. Jordan Lee Agostini, Florida Tech student and FIT Aviation flight instructor from Broomall, Pennsylvania, age 21, due to graduate from Florida Tech College of Aeronautics in December. The 4th person died later at the hospital from injuries that were sustained in the crash. Kyle Henniger, passenger, brother of the flight student and a Florida Tech alumnus, class of 2008, Palm Bay, Florida, age 26. He was a Florida Tech Informational Technology employee. Florida Tech has set up grief counseling services for students and employees who wish to utilize them. Meanwhile, a candlelight vigil is planned for Panther Plaza on our main campus here in Melbourne. That is happening at 8 p.m. Tonight, Friday, November the 12th. I'd just also like to say that words cannot really express the loss in a situation like this. Florida Tech is a very close-knit family, and the loss of these students, employees, friends, alums is very difficult for us. We are at the very beginning of the grieving process and will be proceeding with that for some time. In addition to, obviously, our students, we are reaching out and have reached out to the families of those who lost loved ones. We have staff here with families, and we have staff as well at the crash site, where some family members have gathered as well. At this point, we're going to go ahead and open it up to any questions for myself or for Dean Scott.
Sir, can you talk a little bit more about the 2 active students? You mentioned set to graduate in December. These were already experienced students at this point. How would you describe their level of experience?
To characterize their level of experience?
Yeah, and they were fairly experienced students, but at the same time they were flight students. So at the senior level, they're probably at the 200-hour mark or thereabout. So relatively speaking, that's experience, but very, very junior pilots in terms of the profession. When our pilots leave Florida Tech, they're typically commercial pilots. They have instrument ratings, they have multi-engine ratings, and some of them are certified flight instructors. They're qualified currently to come out of here and to go into corporate or airlines as junior pilots. They could go into a regional airline or go into a major airline as what we call a first officer. So they would be a professional pilot under training. So it's all relative to new students. They were fairly experienced, but relative to your professionals who've been in the business for a long time, they were very young and relatively inexperienced.
And who was at the controls?
Well, we don't know that. We don't know who was at the controls, and I don't like speculating, but in this case I will, probably because it was an instructional flight. More than likely the student was at the controls with the instructor sitting right next to the student. But again, that's just typically how it's done.
In a
we don't know yet.
situation like that, would the teacher be in position that they could take over if there was an issue?
Absolutely. And then whether or not the instructor actually took over, we don't know. And obviously the results of any accident depend on a number of things, one of which, how much time do you have? And unfortunately, when things happen on takeoff, there's not a lot of time for reaction or transfer of controls or whatever. So
it's a little confusing from what I've been reading in different places. It sounds like they got 2 miles from the airport, but yet they were still at the runway. How is that?
Now, it's my understanding, and the evidence we've seen so far is that the plane crash actually took place on airport property. So they could not have been 2 miles from the airport. It had to be just after liftoff on airport property.
Dean, forgive my ignorance. Are there 2 sets of controls? Some of us think of driver's ed.
Our training airplanes have 2 sets of controls. So you'd have a set on the left and a set on the right, so that the instructor has easy access to the controls.
Do they have some kind of simulation training to deal with problems?
Yes, we do, as a matter of fact. We have simulators that we utilize as part of the training curriculum for our students, yes.
Would you have practiced a situation like this in that simulator?
Well, again, when you say a situation like this, we don't actually know what the situation was. We only know the results of it. But we spend a great deal of time with our students training them for what we call emergency procedures or off-nominal procedures. We train students for what happens if engines fail. We train students what happens if generator fails, if landing gear failed to extend, and so on. But again, one of the most critical phases of flight is takeoff. Another critical phase is landing, because you have close proximity to the ground and not a lot of reaction time.
Can you tell us a little bit about what they were doing? Were they down in the Bahamas for the day? Was this a couple days? Like, how do trips like this work? And are they a usual part of your curriculum?
Yes, a trip like this is usually a one-day trip. It's what we call our international operations curriculum. And what they would have done was plan this flight. Planning would have begun a day or so ahead of time. You know, what are we going to do? What kind of profile are we going to fly? How much gas we need, and so on and so forth. They would have taken off yesterday and stopped in Palm Beach to pick up flotation gear, because you're going over water, so you want to have appropriate flotation gear available. Flown to the Bahamas, and in the Bahamas they would have made perhaps several different approaches to different runways, standard instrument approaches to practice to those airports. Refueled, probably ate lunch, and then climbed in and flew home. On the way home, they had to stop at Palm Beach to clear customs. You come back into the United States, you need to clear customs, you need to turn in your flotation gear again, and more than likely they refuel the airplane at Palm Beach. And on takeoff to return to Melbourne is when the accident happened. So a typical trip like this would take place over a one-day period of time. It's not unusual to go spend the night, but it's usually done in one day.
And with each leg of the trip, do you reinspect the aircraft?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we teach all of our students and pilots to do what we call a pre-flight inspection before every flight. Yeah. No matter when you do it. If you land now, refuel, and 30 minutes later you're climbing again, you always do a walk-around inspection, pre-flight inspection as we call it.
Does policy allow for a Florida Tech employee to be on an instructional flight like this?
Yes, there's no policy against it. And remember, everybody on the flight was, as you say, a Florida Tech student or instructor or an employee. So these flights are conducted all the time. They're fairly routine, and there's no policy prohibiting that.
Is that common enough?
Well, yes, it is common. If you've got 4 seats in the airplane and other pilots or passengers want to go along, we always reserve the right to limit what passengers we want to go or what non-instructional people want to go. But if we can take advantage of an opportunity to provide additional training, we do so. So it is common policy. It's not a problem with it. What we frown on, I'm hesitating just a little bit, is if somebody wanted to walk in off the streets. And say somebody walked in off the streets and said, I'm interested in taking flying lessons. Can I just ride along on a flight with you? We probably would not allow that. But a person that worked here at FIT Aviation, as an FIT Aero student who wanted to go along on the flight, then we would more than likely allow that.
Now, you're seeing most of the students had around 200 hours, and it looks like even the instructor on the plane was fairly young. How many hours did the instructor have under their belt?
Yeah, I don't have that information right off the top of my head, but I do know that Jenny Fremling was a very, very fine instructor and quite experienced for her age. Jenny is a graduate of ours. I believe she graduated in 2006. So it's like four years ago. So I don't know what her total flight time is, but Jenny was an experienced flight instructor, and she was very well qualified for the flights that she was conducting. Yeah, Jenny is. In fact, Jenny, I believe, requalified very recently and was very comfortable and very experienced in the Seminole. So, again, experience is all relative. You know, you can become a flight instructor with, you know, a couple of hundred hours of flight time. But a couple of hundred hours of flight time is not insignificant.
How many do you need to graduate? Like, how close were any?
Well, what you need to graduate, obviously, is you complete your 4-year degree and all the academic courses. But typically, when a person receives a commercial single-engine land, multi-engine land, instrument rating, they're typically somewhere around 230, 250 hours of flight time. And that's not unusual. You know, I was a naval aviator. I went through Navy flight training. When I earned my wings as a naval aviator, I had a little over 200 hours of flight time. So we've got people flying in combat with 300 hours of flight time, because you finish your military training, you spend 100 hours in your combat airplane, and you're off to Afghanistan or Iraq, or in my case, Vietnam. So 200 hours is not insignificant. But everything is relative. It's not the same as 2,000 hours. So anyway, somebody asked about Jenny. Jenny was a very fine instructor, one of our stronger young instructors, and very, very well qualified for what she was doing.
Dean, do you have a sense of what is the school safety record? Can you remember the last time you had a crash?
I could not remember. Somebody asked me that earlier, and we had to go look it up. The last time we had a fatal crash was in 1996.
Yes.
96. And we fly a lot of flight time. In fact, if memory serves me, we flew about 28,000 hours last year, and we were on track to fly over 30,000, 35,000 hours of flight time this year. So we did a lot of training, and we have a good flight, a safety record. And obviously we're concerned about this event because we want to figure out what happened so that we can try and prevent it from happening again.
Dean, with your experience in the Navy and NASA, what have you been talking to the students about with your past experience?
I could fill a volume with that. But the main thing we've been trying to teach students is that, first of all, safety is the most important aspect of your flight, and that safety is a state of mind. And safety is an approach. It's not a book. It's not a bunch of procedures. It's not something you turn on and turn off. Safety has to be how you approach it. It has to be instilled in you. And we've tried to instill an atmosphere of safety throughout the organization out here. We've done a number of things, like appoint a full-time safety manager. And so we've done that. We have what we call safety stand-downs, and that's an old Navy thing that we used to do when I was on active duty, where periodically you just shut down all flight operations and get everybody together and focus specifically on safety. We've introduced statistical process control, where we take a look at our airplanes and our processes to determine what issues we have most often. For example, is the most often occurring issue radio failure, or is it a blown tire, or is it generator failure? What is it? We're delving into safety in a way that's never been done before, because safety is paramount to us. But we tell our students that in this business, if you do it long enough, things will happen. It's unfortunate and it hurts us, and we try to do the best like we can to prevent it, but things do happen, and we will deal with it best we can, and we'll move on. And we also, lastly, try and tell our students that no matter how painful this is to us, we have to keep it all in perspective, and and I certainly don't mean to sound dismissive or anything, but I'm safer in the air than I am driving down I-95.
You talked about the plane and 4 people. Is it uncommon for sometimes when you have like 3 people on a plane because of the weight?
It's not uncommon at all, and because of the weight issue, you may be limited to 3 people or limited to 2 people or whatever. But part of your job as pilot in command is assuring that your airplane is capable of handling the number of people and cargo that you place in that airplane. That's part of your job. So if you know, for example, you're going to fill up all 4 seats, then you need to light load something else, which is typically fuel. You won't take on a full bag of fuel, for example. Or if you're going to take on 4 passengers and full fuel, you have to limit something else, so you won't take baggage. And by the way, that's not unusual. That's just not a limitation placed on our small training planes, that's a universal limitation. No matter what airplane you fly, from Boeing 747s on down, every airplane has a weight limit to it, and you have to stay within that weight limit. Even the space shuttle does not have unlimited weight capability. So part of our training is to ensure that our instructors and students know how to properly handle the weight and balance.
Dean, we obviously don't know exactly what happened, obviously.
Right.
But are there any issues inherent, potential problems inherent with the twin engine if you have one go out? We've read some research that talks about the tendency of these types of planes to possibly flip over very early on.
Well, that is a concern with all multi-engine airplanes, is that if you lose one engine and the other one is continuing to turn, that does produce what we call asymmetric thrust. And asymmetric thrust can cause the airplane to go out of control under certain conditions. And most critical, like I said, is at the slow speeds and in close proximity to the ground during takeoff. That's when it's most critical. But we don't know exactly what happened on this one. I need to emphasize that, and we'll have the NTSB complete their investigation, and we'll see what happens.
Do you have a message for the family?
The message for the families is how deeply sorry and regretful we are at this tragic time. Our hearts go out to the family members. We sympathize, we empathize, and for whatever it's worth, we feel like we've lost family members also, even though the people in the airplane were not related to me by blood. I knew most of them. I knew Jenny Fremling very well. You know, Jenny was one of our student, our leaders, our coordinators for our student groups. I knew Jenny Fremling very well. I knew Jordan. You know, Jordan was always up in the dean's office. So I look at them as if they were, you know, my kids, and they're young enough to be my kids. So we all are grieving right now. It's a very, very painful thing for us all, and we will do whatever we can to support the families and friends. So that's pretty much it.
A flight student when he was here? The brother, was he also a flight student?
The brother was not a flight student. He was a Florida Tech, I believe, engineering student.
Yeah, we can get that information.
And we can get that information for you.
Have you been able to speak to the families and how they're...
We have an administrator who has spoken to the families. Yeah, I have not. I spoke very briefly to Mr. Henniger, but it was very, very early in the process before we knew any data. Since then, our administration has spoken to the family members. I personally have not. And, you know, we've got people on staff who are very good at that. They can support the families directly, and so we're reaching out to the families, doing what we can.
How are the other students doing, and any hesitations in getting back up in the air next week?
We have had meetings today. We've had some all-student meetings, and we talked with the students about what we know, and we talked to them about this process and how it's necessary to work through the process, and how at some point here in the near future we will have to get back to flying again. And we have assistants, people who can assist students if they want to talk to somebody, if they want to have counseling. And of course, we don't anticipate any issues with students wanting to get back in the air. People who come to this business, they come to this business and typically want to fly, and they understand this process.
When will the students be flying again?
We are not 100% sure. There's no flying all weekend. We'll possibly begin a flight schedule again on Monday. We're kind of playing it all by ear right now.
What's the hesitation at this point?
No particular hesitation is probably not the right word, but we do have to give people a chance to digest what's happened, to sort of grieve, to get past this process. And our students are young. For most of them, this is the first time they've experienced something like this. So there is an emotional effect. And of course, before we put people back in the airplanes, we want to be sure that they are psychologically and mentally ready to fly.
So it's not a safety concern or any concern that there may be something wrong with the airplane or anything within the fleet. It's more...
There's no evidence that there's something wrong with the airplanes. Now, we are just making sure that our airplanes are in good shape. We'll review our records, and we'll take a look at the airplanes themselves, particularly the Seminoles. It doesn't hurt to have another maintenance look at the Seminoles. But I will tell you right now, I would have no hesitation climbing into one of our airplanes this very moment and going to fly. I know the maintenance folks over there. In fact, they work on my personal airplane. So I know them very well, and I know the kind of work that they do. So the concern is not so much that there is a maintenance problem or some other problem. We just think it's prudent when something like this happens to say, okay, let's stop. Let's have time out. Let's grieve for a moment. Let's talk about it. Let's let the NTSB work a little bit. Let's see what can we find out, and then we'll move back into the flight process, not blindly, but we'll move back in the flight process in a methodical and logical and safe manner.
Any changes in operation at this point?
Not at this point. There won't be any change in operation. We'll change operations if something is learned that requires us to make a change. But at this point, we don't see any changes in operations.
So when they get back to the plane, they'll be similar to the plane that crashed. They have all similar planes.
No, we have a variety of airplanes in our fleet. We have several different single-engine airplanes. We have the Warriors, we have Arrows, we have a Citabria, we have some others. And Seminole is our twin-engine trainer. So some of the students, those who are in multi-engine training, will get back into the Seminole. Those who are in single-engine airplane training, they'll go back into the single-engine airplanes.
How many planes do you have, sir?
We have a total of approximately 40 airplanes. And again, a wide variety of planes. Of those 44, currently are the twin-engine Seminoles. We had 5, but now we have 4.
NTSB and Palm Beach seemed a little reluctant to confirm this was a training exercise. Do you have any idea why?
I have no idea. Yeah, that's something you have to address with NTSB. I really don't know why they would. Yeah.
Other questions? Okay. Again, thank you, Dean. Housekeeping measures. We do have a vigil on campus tonight at 8 o'clock. I anticipate no other formal statements from the university today. The next opportunity for that will likely be Monday. Of course, you are welcome to attend the vigil tonight at 8 should you wish to. That will be open to the public and anyone who would like to attend. As I stated earlier, we do have photographs of the 4 that we lost, and we will be emailing those to you as well as additional copies of the press release digitally. This information will also be on the Florida Tech homepage, www.fit.edu, within the next hour. Okay?
Is it possible to go out and get some close-up shots of one of these Seminole aircraft?
Of one of the airplanes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me check on that for you, and I'll come back out and give you a determination. Other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.